Alright then, hey guys. So, today's gonna be just a little bit different, because this time I'm gonna be on my laptop instead of the computer, and I'll have one screen instead of two, which is why you saw me start the recording. Well, usually I start it on a different screen, so you don't ever see that. So, yeah. Last time we left off, Derek just kind of got knocked out by booby trap, so yeah. Let's get started. Chapter 13 Rock Lifestation. Soft-edged images drifted through a dreamlike haze. A sea of light surrounded Derek, buoying him up. He was as transparent as glass, as inconsequential as the wind. His consciousness resided on a mote of dust, floating on gentle currents of time. Faceless figures floated there with him. Some drew near as though aware of him, only to turn away again and withdraw. The only sounds were the fragrant songs of flowers and the color songs of sunsets, and those played in his head without understanding. None of it seemed to make sense, and yet he did not care. He only thought that after everything that had happened, all that he had survived, it would be a terrible disappointment to be dead. After a time, his body returned to him. He was still floating, still adrift, but his consciousness again inhabited its familiar place, filled its familiar space. But his thoughts were as sluggish as his limbs, as though the burdens of once again managing his body's functions had overwhelmed the simple processes of his mind. Presently he became aware that the dreamlike world of light and shadow which he was inhabiting existed entirely within himself. If he chose to, he could open his eyes to the larger world beyond, to survey it, to enter it. He was certain that when he saw that world he would know his place in it, would know then who and what he was. But he would pay a price in peace and silence, and that was too high a price to pay. No, Derek thought firmly, there are limits. I don't want to see it, he told himself. I don't want to know. Time passed, and the enveloping womb of solitude slowly became a prison. Silence became deafness, stillness became death. Whether because he was healed or haunted, what he had was not enough. The larger world outside himself still beckoned. It was not a friendly world, he knew. At best, it was indifferent to him. And like the gentle currents that had borne him as he healed, the larger world was filled with forces that could bear him along like driftwood in the spume of a breaking wave. But he was not without power himself. Perhaps he could not turn back the wave, but he could ride it, and set his own course. It was that realization which freed him. He saw that he was not a prisoner, and never had been. There were 5 doors through which he could free himself, the 5 doors of his senses. All were unlocked, waiting only his touch to swing open and let the world in and himself out. And he would open them, he knew, but not yet, not until he had floated with the gentle currents a while longer. For if he could leave, whenever he chose to, then the womb of solitude was not such an unpleasant place to be after all. The first door Derek tried to open was hearing. At first he wondered if he had succeeded, for the silence without was as complete as the silence within. Then he became aware of the faint rhythmic sound of his own breathing. It was a small step, but it was the first information to come from outside his cocoon in what felt like a long time. Experimentally, Derek opened his eyes a crack, and immediately closed them again. The world outside was disturbingly familiar. He was enveloped in light that was somehow bright without being harsh. A faceless shadow, tall and slender, moved gracefully through the haze which seemed to surround him. Reality had been invented. The dream had become reality, or the dream world and the real world were one and the same. It seemed like some sort of perverse trick, one in spirit and with a present which turns out to be a series of ever smaller empty boxes. Would every doorway lead to the same place? Would each step he took only hold him more firmly where he was? Good morning. Derek was puzzled at the sound of another voice. If he was alone, then he had to be the one who spoken. But he had not spoken, and so he was not alone. But if you were not alone, then you could not still be inside his dream world. And what he had seen when he opened his eyes must be real. But if it was real, then he was alive. He tried to remember the last incomfortably real thing he had known. It was a difficult business remembering. There had been sunsets and flower songs, but they had not been real. Before that, there had been a terrible moment so full of surprise and pain that even in fleeing it, he had brought it inside his cocoon. He had transformed the eruption into the blossoming of a flower, the flames into colors of a spectacular sunset. Then he replayed the moment endlessly to render it harmless. Yes, the last real thing he had known had been the explosion. Derek opened his eyes once more to the light. A shadow loomed over him, faceless and nearly formless as before. He tried to reach out and touch it, but his limbs would not obey. "Turn off the sterilization field," the voice said, and the haze of light vanished. The shadow became the copper-colored head and clothed torso of a robot. The robot was gazing solicitously down at him. "Good morning," it repeated. "Please don't try to move." Derek's mind was slowly working its way backward from the explosion. He understood that he was no longer in the command center. The robot hovering over him was not Alpha, which meant, "Our Animus got his robots," Derek croaked. "Excuse me, sir." "You won," Derek whispered. "I didn't get away. Sir, tell Random I won't stop trying. Sir, I would be happy to deliver a message for you. However, the person you've named is unknown to me. Where may this individual be found?" "Random is the ship's boss. This individual was a member of the ship's company." "Yes." The robot's response was beginning to puzzle Derek. "Sir, I regret to inform you that no person of that name was found when the paramedics boarded." "Not on the ship?" "You're resting on a therapeutic magnetic force field, more commonly known as an airbed. The airbed is in the intensive care ward of the hospital at Lifestation." The wave of relief that swept through Derek on hearing those words seemed to take all his energy with it. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to float in the gentle currents of sleep once more. Distantly he heard voices, but could not rouse himself to think about what they were saying. "He's fatigued," the robot said. "We need his assistance." A new voice answered. Our needs are less pressing than his own," the robot said. "We will wait." The next time Derek awoke, the copper-skinned robot was again nearby. "Good evening," it said, coming to his side. "How are you feeling?" Derek managed an ironic smile. "I was just lying here thinking about all the times in the last week that I've closed my eyes one place and opened them somewhere else. Every time it happened, I found myself in worse surroundings and deeper trouble, till the first time I woke up here." The robot nodded gravely. "I promise that you'll receive the best care." "I know I will," Derek said. "Do you have a name?" "My assigned designation is the Human Diagnostic Medicine Specialist 4. However, the supervisor of medicine for this district refers to me as Dr. Gallin." "Why?" "He has never explained this to me. However, I have determined that Gallin was the name of a Greek physician of the classical age who wrote on the subject of the vital forces inhabiting the body. I believe that my superior found it amusing to call an advanced diagnostic technician by the name of a primitive medical mystic. Since this question concerns humor, I cannot offer an authoritative conclusion." "I think you're probably right," Derek said. "You wouldn't be offended if I call you Dr. Gallin. It's a good bit handier than your other name." "Why should I be offended, sir?" "No reason," Derek said. "At least not when I say it," he added silently. "But that supervisor is definitely expressing some hostility. Probably has a secret fantasy of being a family practice doctor on a settler world instead of a tender to robots." "Where is your supervisor?" "On Nexon." Derek knew the name as one of the larger spacer worlds, and the second farthest from Earth. "You said this is Rockcliffe Station. That is correct, sir. Where is your local supervisor, the hospital director?" "Sir, I am the hospital director at present." Derek frowned. Maybe you better tell me some more about Rockcliffe Station, then. Certainly, sir. What would you like to know? Rockcliffe Station, Dr. Gallin explained, was a centuries-old spacer facility, a station dating from the days when a long interstellar journey could only be managed through a series of shorter jumps. Dozens of way stations had been built while the Earth immigrants who had become the spacers were colonializing the 50 worlds that would become their homes. With the coming of more powerful drives capable of spanning known space in one or two jumps, most of the way stations had long since been abandoned. A few, of which this was one, had been fortunately enough placed that they outlived their original function. Rockcliffe Station lay in the middle of one of the largest open regions along the fringes of space territory, looking out toward the quarantine zone beyond which lay the settled worlds. There were no living worlds in the nearest star system, but there was one planet with a crust rich enough in iridium to justify a small mining and processing center. So Ratcliffe had survived on the strength of its usefulness as a listening post on the frontier, as a transshipment point for processed iridium, and a military outpost should relations with the settlers deteriorate. But these are not reasons enough to keep it active at the peak level of the early days, not enough even to maintain a human presence there. According to Dr. Gallin, less than 10% of the station was occupied, and that was entirely by robots. The human supervision they required was provided by means of hypervision and the ships that called every 2 months. Only because of the chance that those visiting crews might need its services had the hospital been kept staffed. But the managers on Nexon were realists. Dr. Gallin was a hospital administrator because his caseload was usually zero, while the only other medical robot on station, a nurse orderly, had a full schedule of cleaning and maintenance. No wonder the supervisor makes jokes at Dr. Gallin's expense, Derek thought. You seem disturbed by this information, Dr. Gallin said. Is there a problem? Derek thought about the question for a moment. He had grown progressively unhappier as Dr. Gallin's explanation had proceeded, but it didn't matter so much that he apparently was alone. At least Rockcliffe Station was more or less familiar territory, unlike the asteroid colony or the raider ship. He should be able to have his own way more easily here. No, no problem, Derek said. Except I'd like to know a little more about what happened. How did I get here? You said something about paramedics? I do not know all the details. The dispatcher or dock supervisor would be a better source of information. Tell me what you know. Apparently your ship was disabled following its jump. Exactly what happened next is not clear. This dispatcher will no doubt want to inquire about the circumstances. However, it appeared as though your ship discarded or released a smaller vessel, a shuttle or lifeboat, before changing its course and heading into the Q zone. They must have cut us loose after the explosion, Derek said thoughtfully. A smaller vessel apparently was following an unacceptable approach vector and did not respond to the dispatcher's commands. On the assumption that it was derelict, a tug was dispatched to intercept it and bring it here. When the derelict was boarded, you were found and brought here. Did they bring our ship in then? That is my understanding. Of course, my concern since that time has been with your care. Of course, Derek echoed. If Random's ship is here, maybe I didn't lose the artifact after all, he thought joyously. Listen, Dr. Gallin, what would you say to me getting up and doing a little walking? Our beds are as comfortable as beds get, but I'm just tired of laying here. Maybe we could go and see what kind of shape the ship is in, and answer any question the dispatcher has. I'm sorry, sir, Dr. Gallin said. Your injuries are not yet sufficiently healed to permit that. Hmm. To permit that. Oh god, that was my voice. Hmm. What are my injuries? You suffered flesh burns over 15% of your body, primarily over your arms, face, and neck. Three of your ribs were cracked. It must have fallen on the tile I was lifting, one puncturing your right lung and causing it to collapse. Your right eardrum was perforated and had to be replaced. Frost, how long have I been here? The ship on which you were found was boarded 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks? Was I in a coma or something? Burns are extremely painful, as is reconstructive epidermal surgery. Dr. Gallin said, I kept you under chemical narcosis during treatment and the initial phase of recovery. I guess you should be grateful, but 6 weeks. Blatantly, Derek remembered that he had not been alone on the raider ship. Where are the others? Bullruff, Alpha, the girl. What have they been doing while I was narked? I'm sorry. The only persons found were yourself and a human female. Feeling a sudden tightness in his chest, Derek looked away. It did not mean that Woolruff was dead and Alpha destroyed. There was a chance, perhaps even a good one, that they were still on the larger portion of the ship still in space. But it did mean that while Derek had escaped and survived, he had not lived up to his promises on the canonoid. I'm sorry, Woolruff, he whispered. Excuse me, sir. Never mind, Derek said. Just tell me about the girl. She was found near you inside the ship. That's not what I mean. Tell me how she is. Patient Catherine's physical. Catherine, is that her name? Is there some mirror? No, that's her, Derek said. Where is she? Dr. Gallin turned away to the right and gestured with his hand. Orderly, draw back the curtain. Derek turned his head to the right. What appeared to be the wall of his room suddenly became transparent, allowing him to see a slight human figure floating in a halo of light. She was naked and he looked away, faintly embarrassed. When he did, he realized that he was naked too. It was very straightforward and practical for them to be naked in a hospital, but something of a surprise all the same. How is she? Her integumentary injuries were more extensive than your own, but she is healing well. Of course, her chronic condition remains unchanged. What condition is that? I'm sorry, the robot paused. I see that I have made an error. Since we were traveling together, I did not think that I was betraying any secrets by discussing Catherine's chart. I'll have to report myself for this indiscretion. I don't care about that, Derek said impatiently. Has she been awake? No. Nor would we have allowed you to awaken if we did not need your assistance. Dr. Gallin gestured with his right hand. Close the curtain. Assistance with what? Derek asked as the wall became opaque again. Sir, in the course of your care, certain services have been rendered on account. It has not only been our obligation but our pleasure to be able to help you. However, as hospital administrator, I am obliged to determine whether this account is collectible or to be charged against regular station operations. You woke me up to ask for my insurance card? There is also the question of medical history. We can determine genetic endowment directly, but it is not always possible to determine all the synergistic outcomes of a particular gene complex. Without direct evidence, I have been obliged to follow more conservative parameters in your care, which in turn has had the effect of prolonging your recovery somewhat. I don't understand. What about her? Derek demanded. You said she was hurt more badly than I was. Wouldn't it be even more important to find out who she is and to get her medical history? Why me and not her? Sir, while you were unconscious, we attempted to identify you by means of all the standard systems. We were not successful. Standard systems? Fingerprint, retinograph, absolute blood protein typing, and 23 chromosome codon map. We were not able to establish a match. Of course you weren't. I'm not from here. Sir, by hyperwave we have direct access to records of all 50 space worlds. Did you check the records for Aurora? Yes. We were not able to establish a match. But I'm from there. I know I am. I'm afraid that's not possible. Aurora keeps scrupulous records on their citizens as part of their population control program. If you were an Auroran, this conservation would not have been necessary. But you found out who she was, he said. That is correct. Catherine's full records were made available to me. With sudden fury, Derek demanded, Are you telling me that you searched the citizen records of 50 planets and can't find out who I am? No, Dr. Gallin said. We have searched the records of 55 worlds, including Earth and 4 nearest settler planets. We do have a right of request with most settler worlds for access to the records. Unfortunately, those records were not as complete as we are accustomed to dealing with, and in some cases are not even centralized. Also, certain worlds charge exorbitant fees to respond to data requests from spacers, and then are exceedingly slow to respond. For all these reasons, it seemed to us that a more straightforward inquiry was in order. Therefore, could you please tell us who you are? The empty feeling had returned in full force. I wish I could, Derek said hoarsely. Stars, how I wish I could. Okay. So, for the past couple episodes, I've, been doing this, where I only read one chapter. So, I'm gonna stop with this one chapter, and the next chapter will be done in the next video because it seems way too long to do 2 chapters. So, thank you for watching. Bye.